You are an acknowledged expert in the field of AI. You've consulted government institutes, large corporates, particularly in finance, logistics, retail, IT services for over a couple of decades. Studied AI at Utrecht University. You've got a global executive MBA from Erasmus University. So your belief is in the responsibility of business managers to take ownership of the intelligence required to design effective decision support systems. I'll say that again, business managers to take ownership of the intelligence required to design effective decision support systems. A really interesting sentence that. You're a published author, and I'm going to pop your latest book up in the chat in just a moment, which I'm really glad you brought to my attention, and it looks fascinating. So please do give that a mention and a plug as well. And you'll be speaking about today, you've told us, in companies, all this huge amount of data that's providing this great potential to improve human decision-making. However, and this is a however that we often talk about on the podcast, for those who say I don't plug the podcast enough, the available technology is not transparent. The decision-making will be biased, and people question the ethics of that AI. So you've brought 5 arguments today for business leaders to invest in explainability, to create better returns, and you've brought some examples. Silvie, does that set the scene?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. If you allow me now to share my screen, then, well, I start off.
Yeah, absolutely. You should have access now.
Yes.
It's 18 minutes past. If you want to run to just before 22, that will give us a few minutes for questions.
I'll do my best. I'll do my best. And here we go. So let me see if this is the right one. Yeah. Yes, so I am, well, actually, I'm replacing Talishi Doshi, who was about to speak on fairness and responsible AI. I hope she returns to you next time, but I'm happy to jump in with a related topic, because I think if you want to be fair, you can't be biased. And if you want to be responsible, you need to be able to explain yourself. Well, so I graduated in 1996 on explainability in AI systems. So I'm also a little bit older. I have some experience. And after a long career in decision support systems, I decided that the world was ready for a book on this topic. And let me start with the definition. AI is a technology trend referencing any development to automate or optimize tasks that traditionally have required human intelligence. Now, this is a very broad definition. And to understand it really, you need to know what human intelligence is, and which is, as you may understand, a research topic on its own. So since this definition is widely used, I will stick to it. There are some related terms such as machine learning and algorithms. And for this session, I will just use the term AI to reference all these techniques popular today under this name. Now, the increase in AI investments are reflected in the Gartner hype cycle for 2018. Artificial intelligence is moving towards the peak. I'm sure one of you is involved in a project today that includes AI technology. And AI is already used in finance to predict share values, assess mortgage and insurance risks, detect fraudulent transactions, to name just a few applications in the core business processes. And we've heard about it with the previous speaker, how it's used in marketing, how it's used in sales, but also think of supply chain management and transportation. Well, and did you know that startups in AI raise more money, and that within the next decade, every individual is expected to interact with AI-based technology on a daily basis? So AI is everywhere, and a very important development. Now, this is already the 3rd AI wave, driven by more data and faster machines, while using technology already developed during the 1st AI wave in the 60s. The 2nd AI wave in the 90s focused on expert systems. There was no data, so we had to find another way to teach a computer a complex task. Business experts would express their knowledge in a set of rules that could be used by computers to support human decision makers. I graduated in AI during the 2nd AI wave and have been creating these decision support systems for many industries and processes in my professional life. Now, actually, that is not true. I did not create those systems. I'm not an expert in all these different industries. My challenge has always been to make the systems in such a way that the industry experts really feel involved and responsible for the knowledge that is used by these systems and are able to keep the knowledge up to date. Now, rule-based systems have limitations because it is, for example, impossible in a lifetime to create rules to interpret all traffic signs or detect any fraud or mimic DALL-E. Well, just to give you a fun example of the possibilities of AI, let's go to the DALL-E Museum. There, the deceased artist DALL-E is talking to you, explaining about his life and making selfies with visitors as if he is still alive. It's fun and people like it, and the learning experience in the museum has more impact. Artificial intelligence made all this possible. And yes, that is true in some sense. A neural network is trained on old videos and pictures of DALL-E. And the resulting model found patterns in his mimics. And this is AI technology used for fun. But according to Microsoft, what we see here is a wall, indoor, a chair, and a table. This is AI technology that creates the description, and the description is wrong. Actually, what we see here is the analytical engine designed by Charles Babbage in 1837 and built in 1907 in a museum in London. Well, why I relate to this is he worked very close together with Lady Lovelace. And she's generally considered to be the first programmer because she supplemented the article of Babbage with notes about the capabilities of the machines when programmed using a logical language. She also saw the limitations and stated that the machine will not have the power to originate anything new. So the AI machine that beat Kasparov can only play chess. And this is why our best learning machines still don't actually think. A more serious example in finance is the detection of fraudulent transactions. It will use the same technology, and it looks for patterns in past transactions to flag an alarm on new transactions. This alarm will trigger people to look into it and potentially close an account. Now, the regulator monitors all these actions and mandates that these decisions are very well motivated. This is AI technology used for the good, well, unless you are a fraud. But the same technology can be used with good intentions and undesired results. The most cited examples is Google's algorithm to help them selecting new hires. The result turned out to be highly gender biased towards men. That was not the intention. Google's engineers are not stupid. They thought about this risk in advance and deleted the gender from the dataset. But the model picked up the hobbies in the CV, such as cheerleader. So the biases of our past selections are reflected in the historic data. A neural network is just a mathematical function recognizing patterns in data. More and more people are concerned about these biases. At the same time, we know that human decision-making is flawed as well. Who will admit that his voting behavior is based on someone's looks? Psychological research, for example, by the famous Nobel Prize winner Kahneman, proves that it is. So what should we do? All my life, I have been promoting transparent decision-making, supported by rule-based systems. But to my surprise, it seems to be acceptable that we don't know exactly what AI algorithms do, even if they influence our life and safety. Of course, it should not be acceptable. We need AI that is explainable. And this is what XAI stands for. And in the remainder of this short session, I will briefly discuss 5 reasons why XAI solutions are more successful than an Oracle based on AI or any black box IT system. The first argument is that systems that explain themselves have a better return on investment because explanations indicate when a solution needs to be changed or is outdated. Now remember that every AI system is also an IT system, and the track record of IT is not that good. One cause is the collaboration model in many organizations between IT and the business. Here are the numbers. More than half of IT projects are challenged or fail. The general issue here is that people overestimate their ability to evolve systems simultaneously with the business environment. At the same time, organizations overestimate their IT skills. AI will not change this. Second, providing explanations increases stakeholder confidence because the decisions are credible to the customer and your company can answer questions of regulators. This is especially important for the finance sector, who are held to higher standards and continuously monitored. Covering risks with liquidity has been a strategy over the past decades to handle risks. But this is changing. The Dutch financial regulator even suggests in their latest report that operational controls may become more important than liquidity. It means that they need to explain their decision making, as in the example already mentioned with fraudulent transactions. Then number 3, decisions with explanations become better decisions over time, because the explanations will show biases and help to include missing common sense knowledge. This is important because a machine learned predictive model always gives an answer, even if it doesn't make sense. The AI model presented with a foil, fake, makes a wrong decision. When he sees a cat in front of a doghouse, he concludes that it is a dog. When he sees a dog playing with a ball, he concludes that it is a cat. And we know many, many examples, real examples. At a large airport, for example, we forecast the arriving time of passengers at an airport using historic data and machine learning techniques. To use this model in exceptional situations, such as a holiday, common knowledge needs to be part of the explanation. And in COVID-19, we see that these models turned out to be worthless, and we are back to the old approach based on heuristics. Another reason to do explainable artificial intelligence is that it is feasible. There is technology to help you, but if you don't ask for it, well, I developed a 6-step method to help businesses do explainable artificial intelligence in a successful way based on proven engineering practices. And this is actually nothing really new. For the sake of time, I will zoom into one of these 6 steps, and for the remaining steps, you just read my book. And I think this is the most interesting step. It's the step that explains how to generate a good explanation. What actually is a good explanation? This is, for example, very important for doctors, and there are many studies on clinicians and decision support systems. They find it very important that the system really helps them to justify their clinical decision making. And otherwise, they will not use the system. So otherwise, your return on investment is negative. Well, research into this field has yielded some good insights that I used. And actually, the results says that an explanation model must be context sensitive and aligned with the user's belief. It should indicate what relevant data is used. It should indicate also when the model or when the outcome is not applicable, and be transparent, follow common sense knowledge. So we need to have an explanation model to interact with the user, between your AI system and the user. Now, my conclusion is that a good explanation is more than the most distinguishable feature or a list of the complete rules that the system has followed. One thing you should understand from the research is that an explanation does even not need to be complete, because then it is too overwhelming. It needs to be simple. It should be believable. It should have the relevant factors, and also very important, it should distinguish the outcome or the decision from alternatives. As a consequence, you will need a separate model that generates an explanation and understands the user. Perhaps you even need different explanation models for different types of users. AI technology differs in learning performance and explainability. So you should consider explainability when you select your technology. Rules and decision trees are easiest to generate explanations. Now, I graduated some time ago, on a combination. I first used machine learning, and then I used the machine learned model to generate a decision tree, which was then used to generate explanations. And I believe this is a way to go forward. The research on explainability in AI falls actually into three categories. One is to use explainability as an optimization criteria for a model. However, this is very difficult if you don't know exactly what explainability means for your user, and explainability, as I said, is context sensitive. Another is to improve techniques that are better explainable. And finally, and this is what I propose, is to use techniques to generate explanations. And one option here is the idea to combine statistical AI with rule-based technology. Anyway, when I dived into this topic, it concerned me as well. Are we in a catch-22? To avoid biases in decision making, we use explanations that take into account people's biases when valuing a decision. As a consequence, engineers must be very aware of the impact that their solution may have on people's lives. And perhaps we need regulations, as Hessie Jones just asked for. Now, the last argument I present for XAI is that you want to be prepared for the increased demand for transparency from your customers. Also, governments have concerns about the effect of AI on fundamental rights of our democratic society. So AI technology can produce unwanted results, is my conclusion, both intentionally and by naive users. This is no surprise, as it is true for many other technologies and tools. Simple tools such as a knife. It can be used to cut paper, eat a meal, or kill a person. The question is whether we are well enough protected by our existing institutes. Now, the European Commission concluded that there are three fundamental rights at stake. Freedom of choice is limited when you only see recommended products. Access to information is limited when your own opinion is echoed in social media. And equality of opportunity is limited when we use biased data to train algorithms. And European Union created a report on trustworthy AI, and is also preparing legislation to require the right for a human eye and motivation for each life-changing decision. So businesses should be aware that they have to comply with this upcoming legislation. To conclude, I think it is inevitable that machines sometimes suggest crazy things. Therefore, we need explanations. Without an explanation, their predictions can't be used for decision making. And my advice is to have a human in the loop. Well, I hope I convinced you that the explainable systems make more sense for me, and that a combination of rules-based and data-based AI is the best way to go forward. Well, more in my book, and I'm looking forward to your feedback and reactions.
Sylvie, thank you so much. That was illuminating.
Thank you so much. I think definitely, Richard, people might have understood the importance of XAI, looking at 5 arguments that has been presented by Silvie. And Silvie, your examples have brought such profound impact and insights to people how XAI can bring in more return on investment and better decision making, and why people are looking for transparency, especially when data is available everywhere. And we know that tomorrow we are going to be all interacting with AI. We may not know it in the background with the three waves of AI, as you have rightly mentioned. And I'm sure people would like to read your book, in terms of why responsible AI is needed and explainable AI is needed, so that AI doesn't make any biased decisions or objective decisions, so-called. I think that's the key to it, I think, to bring in more responsibility to the tech that we are looking forward. Thank you. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you also for asking me.